Hey, what's up? It's your boy, Creaky Joints McDrymouth, back at it again with another video. Alright, we're gonna look at Relict again today. I wanted to go over the class structure, right? The playable character. We went over the core before. I don't know if I'm gonna go over every single little thing in the system, right? But I figure that having a video like this that kind of gives players a good idea of what building a character on Relict looks like, that would be useful. That'd be something that people would need. So we're gonna make an example character today, and that's it. Yeah. Alrighty. Now that I got the intro out of the way, which I did first try, by the way. Two quick things. A, this system is still very much being worked on. Any of the stuff I covered today could change. I don't think the basic structure of the class and how characters are built will change or go through like a giant overhaul. I don't see this video becoming like horribly outdated like next week, right? And if it does get to that point where this video is completely useless and no longer represents anything of the system at all, I'll put a thing in the description so you'll be able to find that. The second thing is that I need to get better at reminding people to push the happy buttons. I remember to shill at the end of videos, but I have a hard time remembering early on and at the middle, so this is that, right? Like, subscribe, do whatever you want, right? There's links in the description if that's your thing. Let's get into the video now. We're gonna do a good chunk of the video like this to make things easy on me. But anyway, step by step. Right, and we can get the player packet, which is this. There we go. To fill it in as we go along was what they recommend. I don't think it's currently form fillable, but I mean there's ways you can make that form fillable. To make my life easier, I'm just gonna do this. Right, I've got stuff kind of already worked out. We've got our character named and whatnot, and we'll go over all this stuff in a moment in order. But for right now. However you want to calculate your character and put pen to paper, so to speak, that's on you. Right now, like, our resources for player character sheets aren't crazy, which is understandable because the system is still very much being worked on, right? So I don't think that's a fair expectation to have. So just work with your DM, work with your table, try and figure out what works for you. If you have a way to track stuff digitally, great. If you don't, that's fine. Paper, I'm sure, will be just fine. I'm assuming at some point in time in the future, as things solidify, good resources for tracking, your character resources and the like, will come out. But for right now, it's just kind of like, yeah, do what you want. But there's a loose character sheet there if you're looking for that kind of thing. Anyway, where's the tab? There's a tab. All right. So we choose our species, and then we choose 3 classes. We'll get into that in just a moment, because that does sound weird to those of us coming from other systems, is that you are choosing multiple classes. That seems very strange, and I'll get into that. But first things first, we're going to choose species. I'd experimented with a few of the other species. Let me actually go to that. I know I could hold down the control button and then just click on it, but I forgot. There's all sorts of fun little mock-ups we've got so far. I don't know how many of these are going to end up being final or not, but we got centaurs and dwarves and elves and fairies and fiendlings and so on and so forth. I'd played around a little bit with fiendling and firmalite. They seem like they'd be swell, but thematically for what I landed on, I figure I go human. It just works better. Mostly because, like, my one complaint about picking 3 classes is it does make some choices feel a little bit messy, and some characters end up being very over-designed, right? Like, let's say that we had a avatar as one of our little things, which we do. Then we need to make sure that avatar matches our species well. Otherwise it can, or one of our other classes, of course, as well. Otherwise it can kind of get messy if we already have, like, okay, we've got this theme, and then this theme, and then this theme, and then this theme. If you've got like 4 different distinct themes and they don't mesh well, it can become a very over-designed character, which some people love that kind of stuff. Like, I've seen a lot of people who play Pathfinder, they love over-designed, messy character concepts where everything's a half this, half this, half this, half this, right? But to me, it's like, that's just, I don't like it. I don't like being half everything and just taking, like being half of one thing is fine, and then having like a class or another thing that makes sense for their backstory, or that makes sense from a racial standpoint, right? That kind of stuff is my jam. But when things get overly complicated, it takes me out of the game personally when it comes to character designs. So to keep my character here feeling good to me, again, maybe we could have gone with Fiendling or Firmalite anyways, and that would have been fine for you, right? But it's my character. So we went with human because the themes were getting crazy. So just like most systems, base speed seems to be around 30. Size is medium. Ether flow. Now this is an interesting mechanic. There's two types of ether, right? One is flow and the other one is reservoir, right? Yeah, there we go. Reservoir. They normally don't come up and they don't really matter, unless you go into like an anti-magic field. If your magic gets shut off, flow will kind of have a terrible debuff immediately. Whereas reservoir, you keep your mana pool, but if you ever reach 0 past that point, then you get an even bigger debuff than if you had been flow, right? So reservoir is very much a high risk, high reward type of thing, whereas flow is just like you're just effed from the start, but you're not potentially as effed as if you had been a reservoir who ended up using up all their magic, right? So for the most part, it doesn't super matter. The big takeaway from it is it determines like a minor buff. Let me go double check that. Okay, yeah, here we are. So under ether type, flow, reservoir. The big thing we care about right now is benefit, add +1 to mana regen, or benefit, add +1 to your mana capacity. I don't remember if I actually remember to note this or not on the sheet, but in our case, we are human. So we write down flow, and then let me go check. Okay, so I had forgotten to add it in, but we do get +1 from being human to our mana regen, which will very much help us out. I also need to make this larger because I remember that when I do it with this stream thing, it doesn't show up very well. There we go. That should hopefully be much better now. I'll explain all this nonsense as we're going along, but at the very least, we've got our like extra little +1 from being human noted in there. Let's go back to species. Here we go. So we don't have dark vision. You know what? That's normal. That's fine. Our feature is adaptable, which means we get a choice of one of these. You'll notice a lot of the races have just like a minor feature that gives them some stuff. I guess some of them aren't very minor. Like Fiendlings, effectively, sometimes you do want to go partially imbued if you're the wrong kind of caster. But for most of us, we can go fully imbued without having to suffer that side effect. In fact, even the Blink Mage, despite being a caster, can go fully imbued without suffering this side effect because none of their damage types are elemental damage types. So fully imbued, like, drawback doesn't affect us. So in our case, we would just get free immunity to a chosen damage type, which is, I don't know. It depends on how this system is balanced, but that seems very powerful to me personally, but to each their own. Anyways, for human, their feature is adaptable, which gives us a choice of stuff. So perks could let you pick up weapon proficiency, right? If you have a specific build in mind, humans are still very much a thing to consider. Perks aren't quite as powerful as feats when it comes to Pathfinder and D&D, right? But they are akin to it, right? So perks is definitely something that you could go and look at. I've chosen not to. I decided to just go with the stamina because it shores up a weakness in our build. So I've got that written down right there. There we go. Noted that. And then I've also written down adaptable and then the +2 stamina capacity to remind us, which I remembered. Good for me. All right. Anyways, past that point, it has us pick our classes, which I have. There we go. Right up here. Okay. So they want you to choose one martial, one mage, and then one of either category. But it's now, it wasn't worded like this before, but now it's worded such that you could choose like all martial or all mages. You don't have to do this whole split thing, but it recommends it, and I would too. And I don't see no reason to go off the rails. So, for our major, let me go back over here. I chose Blink Mage because it looks fun and I want to explore it and show it off. It's not particularly powerful damage-wise, but in terms of battlefield control and support, I think there's a lot of really fun things you can do with it, which I'll go into in a bit. Looking at the classes we have available right now, I think the best companion martial class for it is not Assassin. I think the best companion martial class for Blink Mage, if you're trying to make like the most solid character you can, would be Knight right now. I think that Knight would make for a fantastic Blink Mage multi-class choice that would really allow you to take those kind of support and defensive capabilities to the next level. That would effectively turn you into like, I don't know, how do I phrase this? Tanking as a concept, like video gamey tankiness, doesn't really exist, but in terms of helping you keep your party alive, I think that Knight would complement Blink Mage very well and would allow you to keep your party alive. That being said, I wanted Assassin because sometimes being optimal doesn't matter to me. And I liked the idea of an assassin that could teleport, right? That could blink around and stab people in the back and that kind of stuff. I don't know. It just felt right to me. I like this theme better than I like Blink Mage and Knight. Although you can make that theme work well too. For our influence, I chose Avatar, because Field Medic wasn't out at that point in time. Otherwise, I probably would have chosen Field Medic, because it kind of fits the theme. Yes and no. Anyways, in our case though, Avatar does give us a little minor thing that does fit our theme and help give us a new little tool once per day that we otherwise wouldn't have had. So I think that it works well enough. I'm just going to keep it as Avatar. Moving on, we're going to go over what choosing Blink Mage as our major class is determined for us. In our case, we get our choice of +3 to the class's primary stat, and +1 to the secondary stat, or +2 to both. We get to make note of any additional perks and features we get from this class, and in that case, it's not relevant. The only things we would normally get at the top was spellcasting, but from the class specialization itself, we will get some features from this class. And then if you chose a martial class, we get to add 2 to the stamina capacity. In our case, we did choose a mage class, so we add 2 to the mana capacity. And then we make any first level specialization choices as applicable. Okay, basically this is just saying that like if it says at level 1 you gain this feature or this feature, then that's when you make that choice. Or on the avatar, no, that's not part of specialization. That's just part of the core, so that's not a good example there. But I think that Knight and Assassin's specializations do have some perk choices, or some proficiency choices, something along those lines. So I think that's what that would be referencing. But we'll go and look at those pages in a second. And then we also get to add the class's toughness rating to the character's toughness. So that's not just going to be a thing from the major class, that's also a thing from the minor class. And then those two numbers together combined with some math is what's going to determine how survivable you are. In our particular case, our character's pretty frail. The caster classes don't have the best toughness, and then of the martial classes, we chose the one with the lowest toughness right now. Assassin only gives us 2, so we are quite squishy, but we're gonna hopefully make up for that via doing tricky shenanigans that I'll go into in a little bit. Here's the thing we really care about as far as classes go, is specializations. Specializations are a way to further customize your character, and the main choice you make during level up. Each class has different specialization options for each level. Some are unique to your major class, some increase your stats, and some allow you to choose extra perks or better incorporate your other classes. Your major class description has specific details. So we'll get into this in just a moment, but what it's alluding to here is that we get all the Blink Mage stuff, but we don't get all the Assassin stuff, and we don't get all the Avatar stuff. We kind of do. We get their spell list and their skill list, but at a cost. Skipping down here to minor class, we do get access to all of their abilities. That's the word they use, not skills. Sorry. We do get access to all their abilities, but the cost to cast them is doubled. So we can still do all the assassin stuff, but that will cost us double the stamina we otherwise would have had to spend had we picked Assassin as our main class, right? So things are a lot more expensive because it's our minor class instead. Same with our influence class. We can do all of the avatar stuff, but the mana cost for that is quadrupled, so times 4, right? So that's probably not going to be very viable unless we do pick one of our options during our specialization choices that does allow us to ignore the doubling or the quadrupling for one of those skills or spells. So that's a good way to multi-class, so to speak, right? Is it's just like you've got your primary, and this is what's determining the majority of the things you can do, at least on the cheap, right? But if you're just like, ooh, I really want to be able to do this skill specifically from the assassin, but make it cheap, and a lot more approachable, then that's an option you can go for, right? And if you don't want to do that, then you can pick up a perk, I think is the alternative option. But we'll get into that in just a little bit. Similarly to the major class, this minor class also gives us some stats, right? You either get +2 to the minor class's primary stat, or +1 to both of their stats. Let's see here. This also increases your stamina capacity or mana capacity by 1, depending on what choice it was. In our case, it is martial, so our stamina capacity goes up by 1. And then, of course, we've already gone over the toughness rating. So for influence, again, it's just +1 to either of them. So you can see how at the very beginning we had upwards of +3 and then +1, or probably 2 and 2, right? And then it's kind of dropped off a little bit to just 2 or 1 and 1, and now here it's just 1, but you have your choice between your primary or secondary. Which I feel like this could be made shorter. Just a quick thing for Nost there. I feel like that could be reworded and made shorter. But otherwise it makes sense. Like, I don't have any actual complaints here. And it's just an actual publication. I feel like it can be abridged. Anyways, similarly to the other two, this also gives us a slight bump to our stamina or our mana. In our case, Avatar is a mage class, so we get a +1 to our mana capacity, which I think I have reflected in the notes. Let me go double check that. Okay, yeah, I did have it reflected. So here we can see our +1 from Assassin, and then here for mana capacity we can see our +2, and then our +1. The +2 from Blink Mage, and the +1 from Avatar. Right, that's where that 3 is coming from. And then these other numbers, they'll enter the formula in just a second. But that's where we've got that noted down. And you probably could just like write this on your character sheet as you go along, but it kind of becomes a little bit complicated. So I personally would recommend that you have like a bit of scratch paper and you start scratching this stuff down. And then once you have those final numbers, then transfer that to whatever your more final sheet is. Because otherwise some of this stuff can kind of get a little bit complicated. And then as you level up, it's usually pretty simple to iterate upon that from there. But at the very least, like the first time you make those calculations, don't commit things to paper quite yet. I would recommend fiddling with it and double checking things and so on and so forth, right? Anyways, let's get back over to what are we looking for? So we're done with our classes. Okay, we don't care about that yet. We will assign our core stats in just a moment. I have some explaining to do there. What I think I will instead do is go and look at our classes and what we get. So we have Blink Mage. We have this cool little thing of art. What we care about most is this at the very top. So our primary stat is Fortitude. Our secondary stat is Cleverness. So when it was saying the +3 and the +1, Fortitude would be our +3, Cleverness would be our +1. Or we could have gone 2 Fortitude, 2 Cleverness. That's basically what this is determining for our ability scores. Stats. There we go. The casting method is verbal. Our toughness rating is 4. So it's better than 2. It's better than Assassin, but we are not as hardy as I'd like to be. So we do need to keep that in mind and be very cautious with our character in play. So for level 1, they get Blink Disruption. Everything above the specialization line, you get no matter what. So even if Blink Mage was just your influence, you would still get this feature. You would still get Blink Disruption, and you would still get access to all of the spells. However, because it's just your influence, these would all cost 4 times, right? So Blink would cost 8 mana, which is a lot more, right? If this was your minor influence, then Blink would cost 4 mana, which is definitely doable. I think that that is a very generous amount to basically just be like, 4 mana, you could just teleport. Like that's powerful. I think Blink Mage is a fantastic class to splash, or at least from my point of view, it's a fantastic class to splash. I do like it as the primary class, which is why I chose it for this video as well. But to anyone that does have a better, a different vision, for their characters in mind, but they still like the idea of being able to teleport, I think splashing this is definitely doable. Heck, even just splashing it as an influence, and then later on picking up the thing that makes Blink cheap, that works too, right? Anyways, so the Blink Disruption effectively just says that when you teleport, which pretty much all your stuff, I don't know, there's keywording here to make it so that people don't get confused. But effectively, if you are teleporting via one of your spells or abilities, you do make a noise, or you create a bright flash of light, or there's a sort of a vacuum effect that happens here. A powerful gust of wind rushes in towards your target space from all directions, reversing to billow outward as the spell ends. All creatures within 60 feet notice the direction, approximate point of origin, and unnatural behavior of the wind, even if they do not know the cause. So this is basically okay, there's an unnatural disturbance here. The wind is going and then shot back out, right? It doesn't necessarily make a noise, but people can notice it. It's what was that? That kind of thing. So this is technically just a drawback, right? 9 times out of 10, you actually want to be stealthy and you don't want to be making noise. These are things that can give your position away, right? You teleported and pop, they know because you made a noise. Or you teleported and flash, they know the flash of light was behind them because it painted the walls in front of them bright, so they know you popped in. The gust of wind pops in, and so long as they're within 60 feet of you, they're just whoa, what was that? And they can turn around, that kind of thing, right? So this is unfortunately not a good feature for you in terms of making you more powerful. This is instead a drawback to balance the class. So do keep that in mind, that not everything here is here to make you more powerful. Some of it is also here to balance things. There is a way to use your disruption in a clever way, which I very much like. We'll get to that later on in the class. It's a choice between that and something else, which I don't think we end up taking it, but it's still something that I'd like to talk about. Anyways, our spells are not super long and complicated, with the exception of Pocket. You can do a lot with Pocket. I'm not sure I want to break it down in detail, but it is some shenanigans, that much I will say. For the most part, our spells involve teleporting us short distance. Or if you want to go a little bit longer distance, you have transit here. Then your range is 100 feet, right? If you want to use both your actions, you can also cast that for just 5 mana. So there's some flexibility. Either you can get yourself where you need to go with just a short 30-foot jump, or if you need to go further than that, transit is what you're looking for. Send, I think, Send teleports an object you can touch to an unoccupied space. So you basically just I've got an apple in my hand, I want that apple to go there. And so you teleport the apple over there. And there's rules for that. Again, these rules, I'm oversimplifying things. These rules are here for a reason. It's to make sure that the players can understand what they can and cannot do, and so that they can't just abuse it. But I think it's well balanced. I think it's well worded. I like it. Tunnel. Tunnel is kind of sure, yeah, I'll make that comparison. It's kind of like Dimension Door, but instead of you just grabbing someone and taking someone for you, you instead actually open a door that people can go to and fro, right? And you can keep it open for multiple rounds if you'd like. That's what the plus in its mana cost is denoting. But basically it's just okay, I'm going to cast Tunnel. Everyone go through the tunnel to 60 feet in front of us so that we don't have to walk towards the line of archers, right? We can instead just teleport the entire party towards the enemy so they can get in melee and everything's nice and easy. You didn't have to take the dash action and all that kind of stuff. Tunnel, a lot of the Blink Mage's stuff, combined with the abilities down below that I'll get into, are kind of there to support and help the party. In some cases, keep the party alive. In some cases, help the party reposition. And in all cases, of course, help yourself reposition. I think that's part of the reason why it's kind of squishy at just 4 toughness, is because you're not necessarily expected to make a melee build. I think that the idea of teleporting yourself to an advantageous position at higher ground where the enemies can't get to you, and then just sniping at them with a bow, I think that is one of the 2 intended routes. Like I said before, I do think combining with Knight would make for a fantastic build, and that would be, at least at first glance, that to me seems like the most powerful companion to Blink Mage out currently. But we'll just have to see. In our case, though, having chosen Assassin, let me try and get that up here. We might not have the luxury of being in melee. I did pick up options for it, but it's definitely not our preference. Our preference is to let our friends go into melee, and we can use our bow, right? Anyways, so you might notice that as we go down into specializations, we don't actually get anything fancy at level 1. Compared to like Assassin here. If we had been an Assassin and we made that our level 1 thing, we'd get small weapon training and improvised weapon fighting perks, which gives us like a good range of proficiencies now that we can use additional weapons and whatnot. Same with light armor training. And then also like another poison, because you do get 1 poison choice from the base, or maybe it's 2 poison choices. I think it's actually 2. I'm not finding it, but basically they're just like, okay, if you're splashing Assassin, you don't get all the poison in the world. You do kind of have to specialize before we'll start like giving you more, right? Which is completely fair and understandable. Anyways, this isn't the only class that provides some fun little like level 1 stuff behind a specialization gate. In Blink Mage's case, we just don't get that. I don't think that makes it too weak, but it does mean that we have a very limited amount of proficiencies that we're working with without trying to pick up a perk to kind of make up for that. But I think that we can do a good enough job even without it. For example, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to equipment. There's some shenanigans in this section here, which I will get into, which I think is some unintended, unbalanced nonsense, which I tried to bring up, but he didn't reply, so it is what it is. But at the very least, with how things are set up right now, short blade, daggers, longbow, those 3 weapons do what we want to be able to do, and they are actually not on any of the lists that require you to pick up perks. Right? So just any character, in our case, Blink Mage, even without proficiencies in anything, we can use short blades. We can use daggers. We can use longbows, right? There are better versions of some of these items that are locked behind that proficiency that we can't use, but we can still use enough even as just like a Blink Mage that didn't pick up any perks, right? And if we really wanted to, we could. See, at level 2, if we didn't want that mana regeneration, we could pick up a perk, and maybe that's something we consider. But for right now, I'm satisfied enough with the idea of we teleport to somewhere and we shoot them with a longbow, right? If we combine it with the Assassin, let's go back up here. There we go. So somewhere in poison use. Oh, no, I think it's... Hold on. Yeah, it's right here. Ready poison. What this basically means is when you roll initiative and you're not surprised, you can just poison a weapon. Doesn't have to be yours. Can be a buddy's, right? So we can have our tank, and we're just like, okay, beginning of combat, I poison the tank's sword, and then I blink myself up to the tower, and now I'm going to start firing with my bow, right? And if we really want to, we could then poison our bow as we go along on future turns too, that kind of thing. But that's an example of low-level play, how our character would work, right? Is we go and buff our ally, and we teleport away to a position where we're hopefully not going to be too effed. as we went over before, if the party is in a terrible position and we need to tunnel and reposition them, that's also something that we can do. It really only costs 5, so long as we can be efficient and do it in one turn, which we have made our build such that we start off with 8, so that is a paltry amount. And we can actually regenerate 5 per turn right now. So we could effectively do that every single turn if we wanted to. Not that we would, but basically, like, if we need to, you can build such that you can do certain things in your turn. In our case, Blink is very generous. Tunnel is very generous, in my opinion. Transit is a bit pricey, but we have an option to make it cheaper if we wanted to give up our actions, right? Like, let's say that tower is more than 30 feet away. Let's say the tower is, let's say, I don't know, 80 feet tall and we're like 10 feet away, right? I don't know how the math would work there. Maybe that's still too far away, but who knows, right? My point is that, like, let's say that Blink just won't cut it, right? We can still poison the fighter's sword and then use both of our actions to reduce the price of transit down to 5. And then we teleport to the top of that tower, and then from that point onward, we can start sniping, right? We wouldn't have the action to snipe anywhere on that turn, but that's, hopefully you're getting an idea of how this character could play. I will do some examples later on in Roll20 to kind of visualize how some of this stuff would look on like a battle map, right? But for right now, we're just keeping stuff basic and we're going to move on, right? So as you gain levels, you only get the stuff on this page. So we saw what Assassin gets. If you were to specialize in Assassin, it would get all this cool stuff like Maim and its weapon and armor proficiencies and speed increase and choice of where's one of the choices? Oh, I guess they don't really get choices. Okay, well, it's fine. Well, choice of poison, that's a thing right there. Anyways. All this cool stuff, not for us. It's not our major class. We don't look at it. All we care about is this. We care about the assassin skills. This is something we get, but they cost double for us. This nonsense right here, this is also stuff we have. So we can do target vitals. We can ready poison. We can craft poisons. We can use poisons, right? That's all stuff that's outside of the specialization. So as our minor class, or even just as our influence, we would technically get all of that. And of course, we also get all of this. It's just quadrupled. And then if we scroll all the way down here, here's the rules for poison recipes and crafting and the poison choices and whatnot. So we do, this stuff is once again relevant. Even though it's below the specialization wall, that's more so to keep things nice and organized. It's not necessarily like locking us out of it. So what I decided was to grab basic poison and then I think it was Mage's Gasp, because I liked the idea of being able to mess with mages, because we don't really have a whole lot of offensive options from Blink Mage. So I liked the idea of being kind of like specializing our character into kind of a support as much as possible. And this is something that allows us to hopefully fill a gap that I think will be pretty rare. I don't know if there's a whole lot of other anti-mage options out there right now. Maybe that'll be a lot more prevalent upon release, but to me, this seems like something that is just like, okay, the party might not have had anti-mage techniques covered. This gives us an option for that. We can go and poison... well, never mind. This is airborne, so like we can't poison the buddy's sword, but we can still throw our little satchel bomb. I think that's how it works. Right? Yeah. We throw our little bomb. It explodes. The mage has a bad time. That's what's important here. Our basic poison, though, we can go and apply to Bob the paladin's sword or whatever. Right? There's nothing stopping us from putting it on our arrow tip and also like being stingy and doing that on our turn as well, right? I like to use the idea of buffing your allies because that's kind of what I would prefer to do. My assumption is that our Blink Mage is not the damage dealer of the party. My assumption is that there is someone else there who would be more likely to hit, that has a higher might score than our precision score. and we probably want to apply our poison to their weapon so that it's more likely to go off that first round in combat, right? That's my thinking anyway. But that's kind of how that works. Avatar doesn't give us a whole lot. It gives us all these spells, which I haven't actually fully combed through. I'm sure they're fine, but for right now, they cost 4 times the original cost. So, Lance of Power being, 6, that costs 24. We don't have 24 mana. We're not going to have 24 mana for a long time, right? There's a lot here that just isn't relevant to us. Conduit, that's relevant, because that times 4 is 8, and 8 is technically doable. It would take all of our starting mana, but that's technically relevant. So, like, maybe we look at this, right? Same with Unleashed. Right now, it's not immediately relevant, but as we level up a few times and our capacity grows and our regen grows, maybe then Unleashed becomes relevant. But for the most part, our Avatar spells aren't really relevant to our low levels. That being said, even without specialization, we do get this. We do get Vessel. We choose a type. Are we a Divine Vessel, an Infernal Vessel, or an Eldritch Vessel? When I was experimenting with Firmalite, obviously I grabbed Divine, and then Infernal for our Fiendling, right? This is what I was getting at, and kind of like why I chose Avatar as our last class, is because it allowed me to not overcomplicate our character thematically by allowing our Firmalite to line up with our vessel choice, or our Infernal to line up with our vessel choice. It makes it so that the Avatar isn't just something that's weird and it feels, I don't know have the right word for it, but it feels cluttered to me. I don't like a cluttered character. So I ended up sticking with it anyways, because Eldritch is just generic enough and fits with what we're doing. It's very much a support thing. Basically, once per rest, after you cast a spell, which because we're doing Blink Mage stuff, we're going to be casting spells, you may make all creatures that can perceive you make a knowledge check against your... Sorry. Oh, okay, well, it's an error, but twice your spell save, which in this case is Might and Knowledge, gaining the disassociated condition for 1d4 rounds on a failure. And then our damage type doesn't super matter right now unless we're casting these spells. But what is important is they basically save against a debuff, right? And because all of our spells teleport us, and we have that drawback that makes our teleportation noticeable, it does mean that, hey, we effectively can use that to our advantage, right? Now we are all but guaranteed to be perceived, and now everyone that perceived us has to make that save. Sorry, it does say you may make all creatures that can perceive you. Hold on, is there a way to not target the party? You may make all creatures. It doesn't necessarily say. Okay, so in some cases, yeah, sometimes our party gets hacked too. So we do have to be a little bit careful there. But something that we could still do, right, is teleport into combat in a way that doesn't target the party, that maybe just makes that pop noise or whatnot. Actually, no, now I'm thinking about it. Depending on how this is interpreted, this might actually not be super useful because it would target the party. I think it would come down to DM ruling. My ruling would be that you may make all creatures. That, to me, like, gives you a choice between all creatures or not all of them, meaning that the party will be protected. But who knows? Who knows what the official ruling would be there. So maybe we don't go Eldritch. Maybe we would want to grab one of these other ones instead. In our case, it doesn't really clutter us too much because we're already choosing human. So like either of these are viable and they work. Infernal is build bait, in my opinion. You can try and build to have a very explosive turn, which then Infernal takes advantage of and deals additional damage. But that isn't super duper what we've built towards right now anyways. Right now anyways, it's more I take a shot with my bow and we pray for the best, right? Divine is healing. It's once a month healing, but it's also very powerful healing. To me, like the ability to just heal an affliction for free once a month is very good. So Divine's probably what we want to go with. Depending on how your DM would rule this, I do like Eldritch, but it could mess with the party. If the DM's not merciful, you probably just grab Divine with this build. Or if you want to tweak the build and go for like some crazy damage bullshit, you probably want to grab Infernal. Alrighty, let's see. I think that's it. Yeah, because then we go into specializations. So, but having people save against disassociated, to me, that is important. Let's go check out what disassociated does. So it should be right here. There we go, disassociated. Well, there we go. Hopefully you can see it. It's above my head. Anyways, at the start of your turn, roll a d8. Regenerate that much stamina or mana, or your normal regeneration rates, whichever is lower. This condition stacks, reducing the size of the die each instance. So in our case, we can only stack dissociated once, right? But what it is it's a debuff to their stamina and mana regeneration. As you could see with our character, let me go over here. Even just level 1, our regen is 4 for stamina and 5 for mana. I don't know exactly how bonkers enemy regeneration is going to become, but I would imagine that they will be somewhat in line with what the players are capable of at some degree in time, right? So if you roll a d8 and you roll, let's say, even just slightly below average, a 4, right? If their mana regeneration was 5, they can only regenerate 4 that turn, so that's already a valid debuff. But let's say like you rolled a 1. Well, suddenly they're only getting back 1 of those resources, which means they don't have that resource to spend on effing up your party in the future. So to me, it's a very powerful debuff, and I very much liked that idea of being able to teleport inside like a massive enemies and then just triggering this thing that gives them all a debuff because they can all see the flash of light, that kind of thing. And then teleporting back out on a future turn. Because ideally, you won't just die in one round, right? It's not going to be that brutal. Fingers crossed, right? But anyways, that's my concept of that. It depends on how the DM wants to rule whether or not it affects your allies. But anyways, that's really all Avatar contributes to us, other than the little bit of might or knowledge for our stats from earlier. So we'll go into some of like the build specifics for the oh, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, some of the build specifics for specializations. Sorry, for our Blink Maid's specialization later on, but you should ideally have a good idea of like our character by now and what we're trying to do, right? So let's go back over here. So these fun little bubbles here, right? The second number in here is how much we're grabbing from our classes. The first is how many of the 8 points we have to spend and where they were spent. So we can see here we spent 4 on precision, 2 on cleverness, and then 1 on both might and fortitude. But we can also see that from our classes, from our primary class, Blink Mage, we did go with the 3-in-1 combo. So it's just the 1 to cleverness and the 3 to fortitude. For Assassin, we did just go with the 2 to our major, and not the split 1-1, right? So that was just the 2 to precision. Or actually, maybe we did. Hold on, let me double check something, because I might have my numbers off by 1 if I'm not remembering this correctly. Okay, no, I didn't goof it. I got it right. So the 3 and the 1 is here. Precision gives us, Assassin. Oh, go away, Avast. Assassin, where is it? There we go. Assassin does give us 2 to precision, and then the +1 to might comes from influence. Okay, no, we're good. I just got things mixed up in my brain, but that's where those pluses come from. And then when combined with our 8 free points, we got this nice lineup. You might be wondering why I invested in might despite precision being our main attack stat. It is exclusively because it raises our stamina cap, which also goes into our stamina regen, because those two things are both so tightly tied to might, and because I did want to give us some wiggle room to maybe do some of our assassin-y things even without investing in the perk, not the perk, even without investing in the, hold on, where is it? Here we go. So we can see for level 4 on Blink Mage, you can select a spell or activated ability from your minor or influence that no longer has that cost multiplier, right? So even without selecting that, ideally, if we invest a little bit in our might, we can already do some of our assassin-y stuff. So that's what my rationale was there. I know I did want 2 points on purpose because it mathed really well as we were leveling up. I think when it comes to like surprise attack was what I was trying to make it math to. It might have been Viper Strike. Those are both very good. Regardless, we have more than enough that if we wanted to move unseen, we can do that pretty easily, even just at level 1, right? So that's why the might's there. Precision is our main attack stat, so I did want to get that pretty high. If we wanted to kind of just dump everything, could we have gotten precision to 10? Yes, we could have. I chose not to. I think 6 is good enough. Damage isn't like the big thing we're focused on anyways. So we probably should like put stuff in other places, which is where I stuck some stuff in might, and then I stuck some stuff in cleverness, because cleverness does go into our spell save DC alongside fortitude, which is also why I've stuck stuff in fortitude. Fortitude also goes into I believe it is our capacity, right? Our mana capacity is determined by fortitude. So by making that a little bit cranked up, combined with some of our other choices, it does allow our regen to be a little bit cranked up as well. Because even though we don't have high willpower, so we're not really getting a whole lot out of that, one of the big things is still capacity divided by 2. So by making our capacity cranked up all the way to 4, basically, all the way to 8, then you have that to 4, and then we get our +1 from being human, so our regen is already pretty good. So that kind of does allow us to have some wiggle room to not invest in knowledge and not invest in willpower. The downside of not investing in knowledge and in our might not being cranked up is it does mean that our avatar save DC for that Eldritch thing going off, we're probably not going to have big numbers there. So a lot of the guys are probably going to save, which means between that and the unclear ruling as to whether or not you can exclude your party members from that effect or not, I think that's enough to put me over the top in deciding that that's probably not a good idea for Eldritch. So we'll go with one of the ones that doesn't require a save. I think that Fiend works better because we are kind of playing like this more villainous character, or perhaps Blackheart Betty had a change of heart and now she is trying to do good in the world, right? But at the very least, at some point in time in her life, she was this more villainous, assassin-y type character. So I think Infernal would fit best thematically. If we're looking for just simple power, though, I think we'd probably go with the Divine one for its removal of what's it called? Removal of affliction. There we go. So I think I do like the Holy One better, but in this particular case, we probably do switch it from Eldritch to Infernal, which will give us a fun little damage thing that I'll go into in a bit. Whoop. That's not what I wanted. There we go. And then let's go grab that. Infernal. Whoa. Very good. I don't want to be bold. Stop that. Go away. No? Alright. We're Gucci. We're back on track. Anyways. So we have our character here. We've got her ability scores done. Sorry, her stats done. We know what she's going to end up at, right? It's going to be 2 might, 6 precision, 3 cleverness, 4 fortitude. That will then allow us to go down here and calculate our stamina, because we had our little bonuses from human that we already knew about, and that's also the same for the other species as well. At the very least, they'll still get a +1 to something from the species, be that flow or reservoir. So some of their +1s might be here to capacity instead, but in our case we are flow, so we had our +1 to mana regen. And then for our adaptable human thingamajigger, we did choose the stamina buff because we did want to get that as high as possible. And between our slight dip into might, to me, 2 points in might, that's nothing. That's fine. We can afford to waste some resources. Between that and making that choice as a human, that will allow us to have the kind of flexibility we need to do some of our more assassin-y things, right? And then, of course, as I went into before, capacity divided by 2, we do know that getting that number cranked up a little bit will trickle down into the region, which does make this a lot more viable. Now, you absolutely could have gone a different direction, where you're just like, F it, I'm not going to use stamina ever, and just dumped might, stuck that point into precision, stuck the other point into, I don't know, let's go with either knowledge, if we did want to go that eldritch route, or, well, no, because then we're getting rid of might, so never mind. You stick that additional 1 into, let's say, willpower, so your will saves are a little bit better, or you just continue to crank up fortitude or cleverness because they're your spell save DC stuff. The one thing I noticed about Blink Mage is it doesn't actually have a whole lot of things that trigger saves, and those that you can do, you have other choices for, right? So you can see that Repulse has a spell save trigger, but that Ride Along and Far Step don't, and they are both more than viable options. So conceivably, you could actually dump your casting stats, right? You don't actually need to have a cranked fortitude and cleverness for your spell save if you're never going to have them save. So that's something that you could build around. And I don't think this would be the only class that would have that kind of thing, right? I'm pretty sure that like little fun incongruities, I think would be the term for it, would afflict other classes as well. So you can kind of have some fun there. But in our case, we're going to go forward assuming that we do care about having high fortitude and cleverness. So we've got them at a reasonable level, not a ridiculous level, but we've got them, they're above 2, right? Anyway, we can of course do our toughness calculation. In our case, we didn't have any kind of like bonus thing contributing to our toughness, which feels bad, and I kind of wish that I could have found something that fit that we could have done there to kind of apply that patch, but it does mean our base toughness is 6, which is a little bit fragile, because what we can do is come over here to our character sheet. We can see this area here in pink, right, on this side of the screen. In our case, the little heart symbol is 6. So I have to roll on the affliction table every 6 points of damage I take. So we're going to be rolling pretty consistently. This is why I was saying that we probably want to, more often than not, be ranged when we can, because we want to try and never take damage. Any amount of damage, just a basic love tap, is probably going to have us be rolling on that affliction table. And as those afflictions accumulate, we get very close to spiraling towards death, right? Oh, wait, no, that's X plus character level. So in our case, as a level 1 character, that'd be 7. Sorry, 7, not 6. 7 damage. The next one is where it's just the toughness. So in that case, if you have 6 afflictions at once, I am incapacitated, which is not good. Incapacitated is a very brutal status affliction in its own right. But on top of that, if I take half of X plus half the character level, in this case, halves are rounded down is the current rule for this system. So half rounded down is 0. So effectively, just half of that 6, which is 3. So basically, if we take 3 points of damage while incapacitated, I die. So we are very frail. We are very, very, very frail. We can only take 6 afflictions before we are basically dead. So we don't want to be hit. Which is making that knight multi-class look a lot better, because I'm pretty sure its toughness is 7, which is a whole 5 points difference between that and assassin. But that's not the route we took, because we want flavor. The price we pay for a cool character. Anyways, that's the one concern I have with our character right now, is that we are very frail. But we can hopefully make up for that via armor class. We'll get into that. I didn't fully fill this in yet because I wasn't sure at the time of some things. I'm still not technically sure of some things, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. Our passive detection. This is akin to passive perception in 5e. We don't currently have the rules for it, but I would imagine it works akin to how it works in 5e, where you have this number and it's just like, okay, if there's anything that you could reasonably make a check to detect, it's then first checked against this passive number, and if this passive number beats it, you just automatically notice it, is my assumption of why this is in the game. I personally don't like passive protection. Perception, there we go, or passive detection. I think it can be good. It can be good, but I think that sometimes how do I put this in few words? It can be a trap for DMs that makes them inflexible and makes them worse at their job and makes dungeon crawling less exciting and more of a slog that just, I don't know. That is a topic for a video that would probably take me 30 minutes to an hour to fully dissect and get across. So we're going to leave that there for today. It's something I'd like to do at some point in time, but that's not for right now. But anyways, this is here for ease of dungeoneering, right? Is what passive detection is here for. And then I just kind of had like a little class section where I wrote down some basic notes. Obviously, as we level up, we'd probably also write down all of our specialization notes, right? Maybe we want to note some of our spells and write them down in like a simplified way, where we can kind of understand what we can do between that and our assassin stuff at a glance, right? So there probably is like a class notes section on your character sheet regardless. But for right now, that's for you to adjudicate. In this particular case, I wrote down our poison choices and I wrote down our vessel choices. The class stuff from the primary class we can go as we go along, right? Which for level 1 is nothing. So this is blank. This is at nothing. Go figure. Then our next major thing, I believe, because we go beyond influence, we already went over our 8 points and how those work. And if you read the core rules or watched that video, you know how checks work. Here's a nice little overview of the key stats. Very flavorful. I like it. They talk about filling stuff in. Again, we've kind of, I mean, we will fill stuff in. I guess we could fill stuff in. In our case, I liked the idea of noting stuff down elsewhere, which I've already talked about why I like that. Anyway, where to next? There we go. So we calculated our mana and stamina and toughness. We know that we like where our numbers ended up. We made some very specific choices to make sure that the numbers line up right. I did that pre-recording. And then it is unfortunate, but for our toughness, we are a little bit frail. It's not talking about that yet. Oh, here we go. Here's the next section for toughness, right? We are a little bit frail, but hopefully we can make up for that by being sneaky and tricky and that kind of stuff. For armor class, it's not just dex to AC, it's now fortitude to AC. So us having a high fortitude score is actually going to be very nice. Us having a nice precision score is very nice. So because both of those are above +3, the max they can be is +3. So it is a little bit inefficient if all we're going for is AC, but in our case, our fortitude being at +4 does benefit our capacity, and it does benefit regen by association, right? And our spell save DC, right? So fortitude being a little bit above the efficient number, I think that's fine. Same with precision, because that is our main attack stat for our character. Being at +6, I think that's fine, right? So we will get potentially some bonuses from our equipment, and then buffs and debuffs from, I don't know, other player characters, maybe magic items, that kind of thing. And then that totals into our AC. So without any equipment or buffs, our AC is 6, which is currently the max you can have while unarmored, is my understanding anyways. So ideally that does help us shrug off some blows, and then we don't have to worry about having low toughness, right? Yeah, this is just going over stuff we've kind of already gone over. The major class and minor classes toughness scores is all we care about. We don't care about the influence here. It doesn't come into play. We didn't have any buffs/debuffs, so we just added the two funny numbers together, which was 4 and 2. We got 6, and then we realized, oh, we're frail. Oh, we were born with brittle bones. But we'll see how that would play out in actual play, right? Anyways, calculating weapon attacks is easy. It's just whatever is relevant. In our case, ranged for longbow is precision. That's what we care about. And we grabbed melee weapons that did allow us to use precision to attack. So we're good to go there as well. So for us, it's just going to be a d12 plus 6, because our precision is 6. Bada bing, bada boom. Easy, right? Calculating spell attacks and saves. It's the primary stat. In our case, we didn't actually have any spell attacks. The Blink Mage isn't really an offensive spellcaster, so this didn't really matter. But in theory, if it did matter, our primary stat is Fortitude. So in our case, our spell attack would be a d12 plus 4, because our Fortitude is 4. So there you go. There's that example. Leveling up, this just tells you that like your specialization choices is what you look at for that. So when you level up, you go and look at that. Just any stats that would go up. So a lot of things, like we saw toughness was tied to your character level. It was character level halved in I think both cases. But anyways, so that's where like some of your toughness stats would go up per level, right? And then you also get to go look at your specialization options. So we'll go through a bit of a leveling process in a bit. We do finally have to get to equipment, and this is where hopefully Nost does watch this and is paying attention. Because I have problems with this. I'm not going to go into the higher level stuff. I'm sure its problems are even worse because of what I'm about to get into here. But to me, the clothing and armor section is not good. Which is fine because it's very much under construction and that's posted multiple places on those pages. So I understand that this is not reflective of where the system is going. And this is very much like in the rough draft stage. But also, I have concerns. But we'll get to that in just a moment. For melee and ranged, we get 30 gold worth of them, including any modifications. So modifications are very cool. I'm going to go open up both these tabs. Wow. All right. If we go down to modifications, we're just going to skip through this fun list. We'll look at the fun list in just a moment. But you can see... Oh, no, that's not what I'm looking for. Well, this is kind of what we're looking for. Weapon modifiers is giving us like some examples and how you do some of that math to get like your modifiers in place and whatnot. But in this particular case, what we're looking for here is this, intrinsic modifiers and magical modifiers. So if you wanted in, let's say, accurate longbow, right? It's a +1 to attack. Deadly gives a +1 to damage. So a +1 longbow in the traditional sense doesn't exist. Let me double check down here. No, it doesn't exist. You can have +1 to one of the two things, right? Or maybe if we allow for stacking effects, you could have a accurate deadly longbow +1, which would then effectively be a +1 weapon. But otherwise, you do have to make that choice. And it does multiply the cost by 10. So 30 gold right now isn't a whole lot. So having stuff multiplied by 10 means that if we want to spend all of our money on an accurate weapon, we would need to find a weapon that costs, what would be 3 gold, right? So if we wanted to buy only a short blade, we could buy an accurate short blade for 30 gold. So that is technically doable. If you only want like one weapon, that's technically doable. The problem I have with the system, which will get exacerbated, whatever, when we get into clothing, is that you do have some rather cheap weapons, like the club here and the staff here. When you calculate stuff in silver, that's 1/10 of a gold. So in this case, 3 silver is 3/10 of a gold. So suddenly, that times 10 multiplier is just 30 silver, which is just 3 gold. So an accurate staff is 3 gold. You can buy 10 accurate staffs, right? And those accurate staffs deal a d8 and have these fun little effects on them. So you can kind of see how allowing the modifiers numbers and the price for some of these weapons, I think does need to be rebalanced and readjusted for a multitude of reasons. But because I don't think it's necessarily... to keep the video as short as possible, let me put it this way. Things can get very munchkin-y very quickly with this kind of system. I love the idea of like having concrete prices and then knowing how much these modifiers, how much these magic enchantments or the like cost. I think that is fantastic. And I really, really like this system. However, the numbers kind of scare me because some of the things that I feel shouldn't be cheap are very cheap. So something you might want to consider is like a minimum cost for an enchantment, right? Instead of making that minimum 3 silver, you say, okay, this times 10 is on a minimum of a gold piece, or a minimum of, like, let's say 5 gold, right? So then even the short blade we brought up to 5 gold then, right? So then that short blade would cost the accurate short blade would then cost 50 gold at minimum. The staff would cost the accurate staff would cost 50 at minimum. That's a quick and dirty fix you might want to patch on here. If not, then you need to do a lot of math and decide like what you think is reasonable for the players to have. Otherwise, as silly as this sounds, like there's a lot of cool variety in weapons, including variety over here. If you the second column is effectively if you took a perk, right? There's a lot of cool diversity in weapons, and I like that because it gives players choice. But if a superior choice emerges, such as just dump every good modifier you can on the cheapest weapon, like the staff or something like that, or the club. Well, no, the club's even more expensive than the staff. That's weird. Anyways, if you wanted to like just dump all the most expensive stuff you can on the cheapest gear, to me that is going to make for a better weapon than if you'd taken a perk and then like grabbed mace, right? Like, I don't know. There's concern there. I think that in terms of how these modifiers are applied, there does need to be some I know gatekeeping is typically like a bad word, but it's the only thing that comes to mind right now. I think there does need to be a gate. There does need to be a gate on how unbalanced you can make a weapon immediately, right? That there does need to be some thought given into that. I like the idea of multiplying cost. I just think that some of these weapons being cheap on their own makes sense, but an enhanced version of that weapon being staying that cheap in comparison to the other ones, I think that adding like a minimum of 5 gold, right, would fix that, because it means that you no longer have that problem. Now suddenly it's like, okay, cool. Is a 5 gold staff still plus the multiplier, so then it'd be 50 gold, still cheaper than a 150 gold long spear? Yes, but it's a lot less than if it was 3 gold versus 150 gold. You feel me? Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if I articulated that as well as I was hoping to. Nost, you know where I'm on at Discord. Just let me know if you ever want to like hash this kind of stuff out. But those are my initial concerns. I haven't scrutinized everything on here, so I'm sure that if I were to, I'd find other concerns. But my initial concern is that the starting gold is way too generous. I think that 30 gold is fine, so long as you had like that kind of little stopgap. But my biggest concern here is armor and clothing. You have a lot of gold. 185, you can buy a lot with 185. So protective clothing, I'm just going to quickly go over it. It does have a clause in here saying that it doesn't stack with armor. You do have to choose one or the other. You either have a set of protective clothing under your clothing, or you have armor over your clothing, right? You do have to kind of choose which effect you want. The problem I have is that this clause is not under clothing. There's also more clauses down here. Where is it? There we go. Cannot be applied to armor. Yeah. So there are like some clauses can be applied to protective clothing and clothing. Yep. Okay. So there are some clauses, but the problem I have is that the clause I'm looking for, which is this, does not apply to clothing, which does mean that you can take not rags, because it has no cost, and I assume that would be ridiculous, because then it would just make it free, right? But let's say someone wanted to grab commoner clothing and then modify it. Let's say the DM is saying it's 4 copper instead of 1, right? Let's go back down here and see what our options are. So we have silver thread, we have heart weave, and we have iron thread. Our costs, at most, for the +3 bonus is 800, 400, and 300 respectively. at 4 copper, that does translate. I'll just go over my little sheet because I already did the math over here. If we were to get Heartweave 3 Commoner Clothing, it does translate to 16 gold. If we wanted to get Silver Thread Commoner Clothing, it does translate to 32 gold. If we want to get Iron Thread Commoner Clothing, it does translate to 12 gold. And what these provide is +3 to stamina regen, +3 to mana regen, and then physical damage reduction 3. By physical, I mean the 3 basic physical types. So slashing, piercing, bludgeoning, right? I use DR as an abbreviation because I'm familiar with Pathfinder, and they abbreviate damage reduction as DR. So, anyways, and then they're not clear if this just means you only get this benefit while you're wearing nothing but clothes, and nothing underneath it, and also nothing over it. There's nothing saying it doesn't stack with the under armor or the over armor. So, right now, the way it works is that it would stack. So you could combine it with, let's say, the Iron Thread 3 Commoner Clothing with the Iron Thread 3 Padded Vest, which is also very cheap, at just 24 gold. And now your piercing and slashing damage DR3, and then bludgeoning damage DR4 because of how Padded Vest interacts with it. But cumulatively, it's DR6 for 2 of the physical damage types, and DR7 for 1. That, to me, sounds busted. I don't think that the intention is for players to use, in this particular case, that would just be 36 of their starting gold, of which they have 185 for their armor section. They use 36 of that to get DR6. That to me doesn't sound good. I don't think you want to balance a game around that possibility. So I think that I would again greatly limit like what you can enchant common clothing with, or make it so that they don't stack, period, right? You choose one. You either have clothing, or you have under armor, or you have armor, and you get the effects of only one of those things. They don't stack. Like shield stacks with armor and everything. That's still fine. Any bonuses from like your weapons or magic items can still stack. That's fine. But like, in my opinion, otherwise we get like shenanigans like that. Or another example I came up with, which I typed on Discord, was if you start combining it with some armor as well, Iron Thread can get out of hand. And even if we don't care about damage reduction, right? Let's say that it's just like, well, in my campaign, there are no goblins that use clubs for bludgeoning damage, or goblins that use short swords for piercing damage, right? Physical damage doesn't matter. Everyone's a caster, so all my goblins deal fire damage. Okay, cool. That's one way around this potential balancing flaw, right? But at the same time, like, that's still very much limiting the DM's options and the way that the DM can challenge them. And then a lot of those elemental damage types, their threshold for dying as you go through the damage is a lot more stout. So I don't think you necessarily want to encourage the DM to consistently be going for those niche damage types in order to challenge the players. So to me, like, greatly limiting the ways by which you can get DR and whether or not it stacks, that's something that I would consider. But for right now, we're gonna looking at our budget for our 185 gold, assuming that everything stayed as it is, which again I don't think it should, and I really hope it gets rebalanced. We could get adamantine leather for 30 gold, because leather was very cheap, and so adding the adamantine multiplier to it wasn't that bad. We could also get our full set of common clothes. So depending on what enchantment we're looking for that day, we can just swap in between them, right? And then we can get 2 of the padded vests. We come up a little bit short on getting that third padded vest, right? But we basically have our suite of busted armor that we can kind of rotate between. I think adamantine leather is fine. I think it's fine to keep that as is. It is a little bit silly that it's called adamantine leather, because usually you think of that as like metal, and then leather is very much not leather. So metal. So bad. You get what I'm getting at now. You can hopefully see what I'm getting at. But right now, equipment is a little bit messy. Again, I'm not being too critical there. I'm aware this is very much a work in progress. Where's the section that says that? I know it says it on this page. Yeah. Here's the part that implies it. Doesn't cover what I'm talking about here, but there's an area that implies that stuff's very much a work in progress. And I think that there's more throughout here. No, it's just that one little disclaimer. Okay. Let me go look at ranged. Well, it doesn't matter. My point is like we can recognize that this is very much a work in progress. Oh, also, I very much like your ranged weapons. I don't think they need to be touched at all. Maybe they get touched just for like the gold and silver thing, right? For the exact same reasons I specified for the melee and the armor. Depending on how cheap it is to apply. Wait, no, never mind. That's not what I'm looking for. There we go. Depending on how cheap it is to apply these modifiers to it and whether or not things get kind of wonky there, you may also want to like apply like a minimum gold cost or rework your numbers. But other than that, like scrutinizing the weapons, because I did scrutinize the weapons because I built for a ranged character. I think this looked great. I didn't really look at the stuff that requires fancy proficiencies, so there's that. But at the very least, this stuff looks all balanced. And then I went with the longbow because it does what I want. It has the big range. It does the okay damage, and it the penetrate won't always come up, but when it does, it would be pretty cool. So. Anyway, so that's equipment. Equipment's currently a bit of a mess, but ideally that gets ironed out. Well, that's not what I'm looking for. That's a different video. Alrighty. So hopefully you've got a good idea now of like what our character can do and like what this system does, right? You've got your 3 classes. Your primary is where your level ups are at, and where you just get everything for free. Assassin, you get some stuff for free, but you don't get the level up stuff, and then the abilities or skills, whichever it is of those, I think it's abilities, they cost double, so they're not quite as viable as if it had been your primary, but they're still maybe viable, and there are ways to make that cheaper as you level up. And then Avatar is basically the exact same boat as Assassin, except its stuff costs ×4. Which makes it very much not viable unless you're investing in it. So you could definitely basically splash into Avatar via that level 4 choice, right? But otherwise, Avatar's not really going to contribute a whole lot. So for the most part, your bread and butter is these 2. My one complaint with this system is that it could create problems for certain tables that like to have unique characters that don't bleed into each other and step on each other's toes, right? There's a lot of tables where it's just like, oh, you're playing a fighter? All right, well, that means I can't play a fighter, a paladin, or a ranger, right? Or, oh, you're playing a wizard? Okay, well, that means I can't play a wizard, a sorcerer, or a warlock, right? There are certain tables that don't like to step on each other's toes to the degree that I think is unreasonable, right? I am of the opinion, and I encourage people at my table to like, you guys could all play fighters. You guys could all play clerics. You guys could all play wizards, right? Because the key thing there is that you can still pick different archetypes. You can still have different builds, right? One fighter could have a bow and like ranged shenanigans as their thing, and another one has a sword. One of them maybe takes Eldritch Knight and does like this fun little defensive caster type of a build, right? One of them takes Psy Warrior and has all these fun little psionic tricks they can do, and then they can also like sword and board, which let's say no one had been doing so far, right? So you could have an entire party of 4 fighters and have them feel completely unique in combat. And then roleplay wise, you make them different races, or you give them different backstories, or you make them come from different cultural backgrounds, you give them different personalities, so on and so forth. And these characters feel completely different from each other. They're all the same class, they're all fighters, but they all feel completely separate. So that's something that I personally don't have a problem with at my table, but there's a lot of tables that do. And in my opinion, when I try and design, I try and keep those tables in mind. Because there are going to be those people out there that are just like, oh, well, Derek is playing Blink Mage, Assassin, Avatar, which means I can't use those classes anymore. I can't make an avatar anymore. I can't make an assassin anymore. I can't make a blink mage anymore. Which, in the long run, that might not be that big of an issue once you have like 20 plus classes out there. But that's also a lot of work, and we're nowhere close to that. So what I would propose is we have an alternative rule for the influence. We can kind of steal from 5e and other systems in that we can kind of give you like a former career or a background, right? Something that you did in your past that still influences your character to this day. And then that can still give you that +1 bump to one of 2 ability scores of your choice. Or maybe it isn't a choice and we nerf it a little bit and it just gives +1 to like whatever is most relevant to that career path, right? It can give you some minor effects that are in line with your ability. That's in line with that story, right? So like let's say a Thieves Guild member, right? Thieves Guild access. You have access to the Thieves Guild in this region of the setting, right? That could be just off the top of my head, just a simple little effect we can add in there. And then I understand that they would be nerfed and not in line with the current vision because they would lack a spell list or they would lack an ability list, which means that there's nothing that's being multiplied by ×4, which means that they don't have these options with or without it, right? So that is a significant nerf because we're not going to design an entire skill list or spell list for these backgrounds, right? So then that becomes a question is, okay, well, how do we balance that out? My proposal would be we give them a perk option. Either we just say that they get a perk that makes sense for their for their background, right? Whatever we decide it. So maybe the Thieves Guild guy has proficiency and we can go take inspiration from Assassin and say that they gain small weapons training perk, right? That's an easy fix. Is we can just give them that. It does take away from that flexibility of having access to quadruple the cost spell list, right? But it's still something. It's still something that they can build around and plan towards. So that's what I would recommend. You don't have to rebuild the entire system around that. You can just make it like a house rule, an alternative rule, an optional rule, right? Optional rule of instead of having an influence, you may instead choose from list of backgrounds, right? And then those backgrounds, I mean, heck, like I don't know how long that would take you to hash out, but I'm sure I could certainly hash it out myself, and I may end up doing that myself anyways. We can certainly have like a little Discord chat for that, and people can contribute and whatnot. It seems like it's something that's a lot more approachable, that would allow people to get in the game quicker and allow people to playtest it quicker, because the big downside to playtesting this system right now is that we have so few classes. With the addition of Field Medic, we have 5 classes right now. So you can really only make one unique character. Yeah, actually, wow. So that uses up 3, which means then there's 2, and then the third one, well, that's going to borrow from one of those initial 3s. So already you're stepping on one player's toes, and then imagine a full party of 4 people, right? Well, suddenly people are stepping over toes all over the place, which again, I think is fine. But not everyone thinks that's fine. And I'm just trying to make sure that we can ideally get the people that don't like the idea of having like 2 blink mages at the party, right? Maybe some tables are just like, no, I want to be the only blink mage in my party. I don't want Jake to also be playing a blink mage and for John to have blink mage as his influence. Like that's a lot of blink mage stuff, and that's not what I'm into. I want to be the blink mage of the party. Me. This is my role, right? There's a lot of players that are like that, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think they're necessarily wrong. Just because I'm comfortable with doubling up on character capabilities and character roles, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be. I recognize that through roleplay and characterization and I guess tying my character into the world and the plot and the setting and whatnot, that I can make my character feel so much more distinct beyond just our classes overlapping, right? That we can become 2 very separate characters despite having identical stat blocks, potentially. but that's not what people necessarily want. I don't know. I'm kind of, hopefully you get it. I'm going to stop reiterating it now. But that's my one concern with this system. Otherwise, I love this class system. I like the idea of 3 classes. I just think that until we get to the point where we have a ridiculous amount of options, like let's say 40 options, right? I think that this would be a major turnoff to a lot of play groups. I think a lot of play groups would be like, I don't think I want to play that system where I all the things that I can do, 2 of the other player characters can also do. Maybe it costs them more to do, and so maybe they don't do it as often, but I kind of don't like sharing my tools. I kind of like being the only one in that party that can do those things, right? So that would be a good way to do that without unbalancing it too much. You'd still get your little bonuses. What else does it give, actually? Let me double check that. There we go. Yeah. It still gives your bonuses, and it still gives like a +1 to one of your 2 capacities. So maybe you make that +1 just player's choice. Or maybe you do assign individual things, right? Like, let's say, librarian. That sounds like a nerdy mage thing, so maybe that one gets a +1 to stamina. Or blacksmith. That sounds like something... Sorry, +1 to mana for the librarian. I need to speak better. Or let's say blacksmith, right? That sounds like something that would require some stamina. So we give the +1 to stamina there. And maybe we have some backgrounds where you get a choice. Your choice of +1 to this or this, and then some just are just like, no, you get this. You get this because it makes the most sense, and F you. It's the price you pay for choosing this one, right? And to get around like the whole list of doing away with the whole spell and ability list, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to give them a free perk. It doesn't have to be their choice of a perk, right? That might be too powerful. That might allow for busted builds, depending on the direction you go with perks. Right now, perks are very minor, and I think that it wouldn't really unbalance anything if we just gave them a choice of a perk in place of like the spell list, right? But to each their own. To me, that would slap a nice band-aid on the core problem of the core player problem of this system. So that's what I'm getting at. So now we get to go into our fun little section where I stop talking about my problems and I start talking about some of the cool stuff Blink Mage can do. So we're going to go and level our character up and do some fun examples in Roll20. I'm going to record this on a separate take, so see you over there. So here we are. I've got a makeshift battle map up and ready. So I went and stole art from the various character classes and species and whatnot on the Relict site. So we've got a bit of an example party here, right? We've got Andrea and Paul and Sorna, and then our character here is Betty the Blink Mage. Very good. Let's say they get in an altercation with some kind of noble lady and her squadron of knights, right? Maybe the party's bad guys and they've ambushed this lady and they want her money, or maybe they're not and this is just an unjust ruler that's just up to no good, right? Or it's just a patrol and it just so happens to be that they are in evil territory and they're just like, present papers, and the party's like, no, and they're just like, oh, okay, well, I guess it's time to fight, and then they go and fight the party, right? But regardless, the party finds themselves in an altercation with this fine lady and her knights, right? So, as level 1 Betty, right, about all we can do is mark off 2 mana, and we teleport up over here, right? So let's count it. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So we've teleported our 30 feet from Blink, which cost us 2 mana of our 8 mana. So we're currently at 6, and then next turn we're going to regenerate 2 of that because we can regenerate 5 of it, I think is what it is. But that's more than our maximum. So anyways, there's an example of what we can do, right? Before we do that though, we take in our little free thingamajigger to poison Paul's weapon. Let's say Paul is a melee combatant, right? So now Paul's has our basic poison applied. And then first action, we teleport. Second action, we shoot at the fancy lady with our longbow. So because it's Roll20, I went and made a macro for this, and bada bing, bada boom. Oh, I didn't roll the dice. Hold on. I need to fix that. There we go. Okay, we got our dice now. So we rolled a 4. 4 plus 6 is 10, as you can see off to the side here. So we would hit. We're going to roll damage, which, as far as I know, we don't actually apply our plus 6 to our damage. So I think we just do 2 damage, but I'll need to double check and ask about that. Because I just realized that I don't think it says anywhere in core that we actually add our modifier to damage as well. I think it's just whatever the damage is determined by your weapon is how it's stated. Which means that, like, to me, I'm used to, like, being able to add your modifier to your damage, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how the system works. So if I'm correct, then that's what happened, right? Is if this lady had 10 or less AC, we hit and we dealt 2 piercing damage to her. So the DM would then mark that down. And then the other players, they get their turn. Paul comes up here and he gets to stab at this knight and deal some poison, and now they're under the poison debuff. And then Andrea can come and do stuff as well. And let's say Sorna's a blaster mage, so maybe she actually backs off a little bit and then, like, goes and hits one of these fun friends that have already taken some damage somewhere in here, right? But that's an example of perhaps what our first level altercation looks like with these knights, right? Let's go back to the beginning of combat now. Very good. All right. So let's say Betty is now level 2. All right. Well, not a whole lot happened then. We get to choose a perk, or we can increase our mana regen by 1. The perk list isn't expansive, and I think that we're doing fine in terms of our combat stuff. So I think we probably ignore the perk for now, and we just take the mana regen, which I'm not going to go and apply to the math right now, but you see what I mean, right? For the most part, I'm going to gloss over these grade, there we go, these grayed out ones, because they're mostly just increase stat, or increase regen, or choose perk, that kind of thing. Of course, for level 4, that one's, kind of a bit important, because it's going to reduce the penalty for your minor class or your influence class, right? So that, or pick a perk, is kind of one of those important levels. But for the most part, it's just a whole lot of increased stuff. What really matters to me are these blue levels. And yes, this is pretty much the same way it works for, like, Assassin too, right? So level 1 is a blue level, level 3 is a blue level, 6 is a blue level, and these things are pretty formulaic, right? The gray levels are pretty consistent, only, of course, they have more of a bend towards stamina because it's a martial class, whereas Blink Mage, of course, has more of a bend towards mana because it's a casting class, technically, even though it doesn't really blast, and it's really more like a tricky class with his blinking and whatnot. Anyways, our first specialization choice could be Far Step, could be Ride Along, could be Repulse. Far Step and Repulse are both very cool, and I like them, but my choice, hands down, would have to be Ride Along. When you cast a spell to teleport tag that changes your location, you may take one willing creature that you touch with you. So, let's say we're level 3 now. Not only would our toughness and whatnot have gone up by now, but we also have this fun ride-along thing. So in this new example, let's say we poison Paul's blade. Same as before. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. But now we did say that Sorna's a blaster mage, right? So let's grab Sorna. We blink, and via ride-along, we can blink her with us. So now we are both over here, and we can fire our longbows at the funny lady, or whatever Sorna does with her blaster spells, right? So that's an example of how our kind of kit is upgraded. And of course, as the battle goes further, let's say that this hill is like a 10-foot cliff face, and it takes them a bit of their movement to get up it, but they do eventually make it up to us to the point where they can kind of climb up and start attacking us, right? Well, as combat proceeds, perhaps we then blink over here, right? there's funny things that we can do. Maybe Sorna's fine where she is, and we blink ourselves over here, or maybe we blink ourselves behind them. I don't know if flanking is intended to be a rule yet or not. I don't think flanking currently exists, but let's say that some flanking type of a rule eventually exists where there's a house rule in play, right? That could be a way for us to get into an advantageous position. And then we switch to our short blade and we go to town on this knight, right? So there's kind of an example of like how our level 3 play could potentially look. And of course our good melee friends wouldn't ran in, right? Anyways, if we go back to our class, so level 4, we get to make stuff cheaper. Here's where it is worth considering some things for Assassin. I haven't really looked through Avatar too much, but I recall Viper Strike and Surprise Strike being very good. So let's say we wanted to add one of these two to our kit. Let me just quickly skim them and I'll do a jump cut. Okay, so of the two, normally I think I'd probably want to grab Viper Strike because it does let you, for 5 stamina, make an attack and then also move. So that is some conservation of actions, because you only have 2 actions. And in this system, movement is an action. Attack is an action. So in order to do that, normally that would take 2 actions, but in this case, it's only taking 1, which to me is very powerful to basically be able to get free movement while still making an attack. And then, of course, you could use your other action to then attack again. So this Viper Strike at a nice cost of 5 stamina, considering that the attack action that we take after that would also cost 1 stamina, possibly more if we're modifying that attack. That's something that we could then do for 6 stamina, which even though we're kind of like not well situated, let me go over here, there we go, to be like a stamina character, that's still something we can do. Which that cap I think is attached to our level at least a little bit. I think that's what this 1 is here. So by level 4, like our cap would be a little bit bigger, so we could do that, and our regen would also increase a bit more. So I don't know. It would give us some good opportunities, but considering that we can kind of already just teleport around a little bit, this would kind of be doubling up on like movement options, right? So I think what we'd probably want to grab instead is Surprise Strike. This lets us, as a part of the skill, you make the attack, right? If you hit a target that cannot currently perceive you, okay, bit of a typo there, but cannot currently perceive you, the attack deals maximum damage. So in this case, we don't roll our d6, we just deal 6 damage, right? So I think that's very powerful. I like that. Once you've damaged a target with a skill, it cannot become the target of it again for 24 hours. So here's let's say that we grabbed that, right? So now we're doing this combat encounter, but we're level 4 now, right? So let's say that Betty went and chose the let's say this map doesn't quite give us exactly what we need. No, I think it could, because there's 2 areas that could block line of sight, right? They're lower here, and there's also this rock here. So let's say you say, hey, DM, if I were to teleport behind this rock, let's say right there, right? Or maybe right there. Well, right there probably wouldn't work, but we can pretend that combat started a little bit differently, right? There we go. Cheating. All right. Let's say, hey DM, if I were to teleport behind this rock, would that block their line of sight from the flash of light that goes off from my disturbance? Because while they are fairly close, there's also a 2 things of height that would be blocking that light, and it's a bright sunny day. They're distracted by the party. Could I teleport over there and be unseen? And the DM says, you know what? Sure, that sounds swell. So where was it? There we go. So we teleport our good friend Betty over here. And now they don't know where we are, right? So then let's say we use our attack doing something with poison and applying poison to a weapon. I don't know. We make sure that we don't waste that extra little action, right? And then or I guess if we really, no, okay. That's an example for later. And let's say it's the next turn, right? Our buddies are now in combat, distracting them. If we wanted to have brought Sorna with us, that's something we could do, but I don't think we do that this time because we're trying to be sneaky and she might accidentally give away our position. let's say we then climb up with this rock. They don't know that we're doing this, and so now our attack is something they're not expecting, right? So surprise strike is in effect now. They cannot currently perceive you because they didn't know where we teleported to necessarily. So now that they are surprised by that, we can now hit the fancy lady and yep, I'm assuming a 15 would hit. And we don't even have to roll. Let's just see what we get anyways, though. All right, cool. But in this particular case, we did surprise strike. We mark off our 5 stamina, and we deal 6, right? That is something we have to declare ahead of time, I believe. But, well, hold on. There we go, because I want to ping. But we deal 6 damage to the fancy lady, which I think is worth the 5 stamina and the opportunity cost of having not taken a perk, assuming that we don't have any, like, key perk we're looking for, right? So now that's an example of how our character can kind of, like, play at level 4. We don't really get anything amazing for a while. Shadow Blink kind of lets us, is probably what we want to grab, because it lets us teleport without having to do the blink disruption. So now let's go back to that exact same example of teleporting over here. Let's say the DM had said no, that would reveal you. Okay, well, let's say that we are now level 6. Now we can mark off 4 mana instead to pay the doubling cost of Shadow Blink, and now we can be here without giving away a position, and then the whole thing plays out just like before. So that's, in this example, let's get around an inflexible DM, but you can kind of see how, depending on the battle map and the scenario, this could have a wide range of options in terms of being sneaky, right? So Shadow Blink here probably fits the best with our choice. That being said, Harness Disruption, I do want to go over a little bit. You can also double the mana for the blink to weaponize it, right? The affected radius of your disruption is doubled, and any creature directly adjacent to your destination space make attacks against you with a minus 1d6 penalty until the end of their next turn. They also make a fort check against your spell save DC. Creatures that fail it are knocked down. So in this particular case, let's say we had taken that instead. So now, let me double check. Yep, that is 30 feet. Very good. We could instead do Disruption, and we go here. And now all these people, the 5 characters that were next to us, they need to save against getting knocked over. And they also have a penalty to against attacking us. So if we were more of a melee character, this would be a fantastic option. For that knight character, I would wager this is probably the choice you make at this level, right? Because this gets you right in the middle of the fray, and they're disrupted as well. Just, with the giant boom, you're there, and suddenly the enemy is having some problems. I also just realized I put my earbuds in. I don't actually need them in right now, so let me take those off. Sorry about that. All right. But that's an example of how that could work. Or another fun thing is if we go up over here. Where is it? Here we go. So ranges and stuff like that get doubled, right? So now everyone within 60 feet could hear your bamf, right? When you nightcrawler your way over to someone. So if you needed to make a loud noise as like a signal to get the party's attention, and the party wasn't within 30 feet of your teleportation, well, you could augment that noise and make it 60 feet. You could also, of course, send an object, right? You can send an object 30 feet, which then makes a 60-foot long bamf noise. So you could alert the party from 90 feet away would be a cool use of that, depending on how clever you are. The whole flash of light being visible from 300 feet away, that's now 600 feet away. So if you were to teleport an object 30 feet into the sky and then double that 300 feet, that's something that you could use to start like the beginning of a war, right? To signal that, hey, I'm at the back of the base. We're about to start hitting it. So the army in front, it's go time now. They see the giant flash. That's their signal to go. They go in and begin distracting them at the front of the base while you and your party sneak in through the back and then go and try and behead the evil king while their warriors and knights are none the wiser and are too busy at the front of the castle, right? So there's little clever tricks you can do with that kind of thing. Same with this, but like less so. I don't know. I don't know how you'd use that in a clever way off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's a way to make the little whoosh of air be a clever thingamajigger. But you can kind of see how yes, the main reason we take this is probably for its combat section right here, but you can see how doubling the radius can be of benefit, right? But in our case, we probably want to grab Shadow Blink just so that we can make better use of Surprise Strike, since we've invested in that, right? Oh, what am I doing? Here we go. So let's get everyone back to normal. Wop, and wop, wop. And I believe this was what I was using for the example. There we go. All right. So if we go down from there, we have our gray levels again. I'm sure those are very cool and important, and we have another little opportunity to go and grab Surprise Strike if we hadn't done that before. Let's say we did have a key perk we wanted to pick up, and that took priority. Well, now we definitely have Surprise Strike by now. Or let's say, even though I don't think it's necessary because we can teleport, let's say we want to be doubly safe, so we grab Viper Strike as well. Or let's say we really like Fade. Fade is honestly very cool. I don't remember the details, but I know it helps very much with like evasion and like action economy nonsense. Fade is probably worth taking as well. But my point is that like here's your opportunity at level 8 to make yourself a bit more flexible in terms of your multi-class nonsense. And if we didn't want to increase a core stat at 7, we could have taken that perk there. Like there's a lot of opportunities to take perks. So if like you really need a perk for your build, which again, so far they don't seem super impressive, but let's say power creep becomes a thing and suddenly perks become very impressive, and they're things that you build around, then like you certainly can take perks that you build around, at some of these other levels. But regardless, we're keeping ourselves fairly basic for now. At level 9, here's where we get, my favorite, feature, Double Blink. Blink Sprint, I think is kind of bad, and I don't like it, and it's stinky, and I've already talked about it in another live stream that I'm pretty sure Nost saw, so I'm not going to go dump on it right now. But in my opinion, Double Blink is like the must-take. Of these two things right now, Blink Sprint, stinky. Don't take it. Double Blink, one of the best things your Blink Mage can have. It does take a little bit to get there, like we are level 9, but it's also like very cool and very good, so like I think it's worthy of a level 9 option. Anyways, when you cast the blink spell, so it is just the one blink spell, right? Not all of them. This just affects your basic blink, which for our purposes, that's all we care about right now. You may spend triple the required amount. So instead of spending 2, you now spend 6. But by level 9, that's a drop in the bucket. Spending 6, small potatoes, right? That's definitely doable, especially with our build where we did invest a little bit in our fortitude and whatnot. Anyway, you gain an additional use of the blink spell as a free action, must be used during the same turn. So here's where things get really cool. You can now blink twice and carry along. Where is it? No, ride along. There we go. Ride along would synergize with this because you're still casting a teleport tag spell, right? So level 9 is where like the repositioning, here we go, there we go. The repositioning shenanigans and the support shenanigans of this class get really cool in my opinion. So let's say the enemy unit, let me try and grab them and drag them further away, starts quite a long ways away. Let's say you guys are like right there. So you guys would either have to run over here and then over there, which looks like that would take like, what, 40 feet? Let's see, 20 and then 15. Yeah, about a little under 40 feet. If we're actually doing specifically Paul, that's 15 plus 25. Yeah, that's 40 feet. Paul, base speed 30. That means he'd have to take his move action and then possibly even dash if he wanted to get into melee. Obviously, there's a strategy that you could just be patient and let them come to you and maybe ready in action and whatnot. Let's just pretend that we don't live in a world where that matters, right? Instead, what we can do is we can say, "Hey, Paul, yeah, we're gonna go on a little trip." And Paul's like, "Okay, so let's go 30 feet." Right there, that looks good to me. All right, so just kitty corner to this boulder. Womp, womp. Very good. And now Paul only has to jump off the side of this cliff on his turn. He doesn't have to use both his movements, and he can still attack, right? And then, of course, we can have poison his weapon for free via our double blink. We can also then teleport ourselves. Let me see if there's actually... Yeah, we can teleport ourselves to the other cliff side if we wanted to, and then take our funny little archery shot at the funny lady or one of her knights, right? So that's what double blink would allow us to do potentially. It allows us to get Paul in a good position and then get us in a good position. Let's say we didn't even want to leave the possibility of Paul having to take a movement. We just wanted to let Paul already be in position so Paul can make 2 strikes. So we could just use the utility of double blink, stack our little carry on our what is it freaking called? Our ride along. There we go. And we could just blink our second time immediately to right here. Boop. Now Paul's in combat. We do get threatened by this knight, which unfortunately we are a bit fragile, so we're going to hope that that's worth it. But that would allow, assuming that you can attack diagonally, which I would assume so, that would allow Paul to put both of his attacks into downing the fancy lady, and then let's say that's enough to kill her, and then Paul points a blade at her throat and says surrender, and then that's a way to end the combat way early, right? We did have to consume 6 mana and put ourselves at risk, right? But we have effectively enabled Paul, who otherwise would have used his entire turn doing nothing, to instead speed run the encounter, right? That's the power of utility. That's the power of a support caster, right? So that's something that I think is very cool that I could absolutely see happening at a table. Consistently, probably not, because the DM would probably get very tired of that kind of stuff. Or maybe these knights aren't as loyal, or they don't value the noble lady's life as much as they probably should. And so they're just you know what, I'm going to take that bet, and then they both attack Paul, right? But then that still keeps us safe, because Paul is the one that's pissed them off, not us. And then we can just blink up here next turn and then start taking pot shots, right? So here's it's a fun little example of how our silly little blink thing could come in handy. Let's say combat's already happening, right? We are in the middle of combat. So let's drag our people around. Let's put Paul there, and let's say the lady's in the back here, because she's probably some kind of blaster mage. And the guys that are kind of moving up on Paul. Let's say we'd blinked over here with Sorna earlier. That sounds like something we would do. All right, so let's say that's the field position. Let's say Sorna has a Burning Hands type of a spell, right? And then let's also say, let's say that, yeah, okay, no, never mind. We'll get there in just a moment. All right, but let's say we're going to blink Betty and Sorna over here. I don't think they necessarily have to go right below you. Regardless, we're gonna cheat, right? Let's just say that that the position is more so like this, right? Because I'm pretty sure there were some party. Yeah, no, that would have been about where we were, or we were here in the other example. Anyways, my point is, let's say we blink ourselves. Let me make sure I'm not cheating. Okay, I'd be cheating a little bit. But let's say that we were in a position where we could reasonably do this. We can put Sorna here, and then we can grab Andrea instead with our double blink, and then we can blink ourselves. Hold on. There we go. Over here, next to the fancy lady. And then Andrea on her turn can unleash her double attack into fancy lady. And maybe we even pull out our little short sword and help threaten her as well, right? So now suddenly the combat is completely different, right? Because Sorna on her turn unleashes a massive AoE on these fun knights. Yeah, Paul gets caught in the crossfire, but that's fine. Paul's probably like our tanky unit, so it's all good. It's more than worth the spread damage on all these knights. And now suddenly we are able to do a fun little pincer attack against the enemy's commanding unit. That's an example of how like the tide can turn so quickly if you are making use of this kind of repositioning ability that our Blink Mage build anyways is capable of, right? So you can kind of see how like we may not be powerful in our own right. We're just using the basic longbow for the most part. But if we are creative with what the Blink Mage can do, there's a lot of really cool and creative stuff that we can do. Hopefully that kind of utility makes sense to you and like is as impressive to you as it is to me. But like, this is the kind of stuff that I live for, baby. I like making like clutch plays with my characters. So Blink Mage is 100% my type of class. Like this kind of shenanigans, I love it. Anyways, we move on a little bit. We have more fun little numbers go up, right? Numbers go up. That's what we need here. And then level 12, we get more choices, flicker or phase out. These are both defensive options. Phase out's a bit wordy, but what it basically means is you teleport into like the ethereal plane, right? You're halfway between our plane and the ethereal plane, and if you have them make a will save against your spell save, you can also bring an enemy with you potentially. So not only can this become a defensive thing that you use for you, but you can also use this to pseudo take one of the enemies out of the fight. So this is another little nice control option that I very much like and feel like our character would probably take. But if we're looking for just a nice solid cookie cutter defensive option, Flicker's nice. Your AC goes up by 5, which considering that the die in this game is a D12, an increase of 5 is pretty significant. It does mean that our attack rolls are at a penalty, but we're not the big source of DPS anyways. We're not here to be the DPS. We're here to get people in a position and to get ourselves in a position. So if we needed to, as an emergency, do some tanking, we can like put ourselves in a doorway and say, I turn on Flicker. The enemies won't be able to get past me, and they won't be able to really damage me, and my allies can shoot over my head or between my legs or whatnot, and we have this nice little setup now where we've kind of like imposed me as a door and a stopgap where we can tank. Again, Flicker is very much more the option I would take with the Knight multiclass. It is absolutely something that would be helpful to a more tanky sword and board type of a character. I think in our case, we'd probably take phase out. I don't really have an immediate example for it, except we're just like, we could be like, oh, okay, so from here, we also phase out, and let's say Fancy Lady doesn't make her save. Let's say she was their big source of DPS. Well, now suddenly she's no longer as effective at damaging the party. We kind of have forced her to attack us. Actually, does she still attack us for neutral or not? Okay, yeah. It doesn't actually let her attack us for neutral. So we'd still be attacking her for half. She'd be attacking us for half. Everyone else would be attacking her for half. But it still halves her damage. So it kind of takes both of us out of the fight and makes us a bit tankier. But maybe that's what we needed, right? We're now taken out of the fight. Andrea can now turn on these knights down here. Let's say we teleported differently, right? Let's say that we teleported here and here, respectively, instead. Now suddenly Andrea can attack this knight who was already damaged by like the burning hands and whatnot. And we've taken Fancy Lady out of the fight for a little bit. Not exactly, but like her damage is halved. What's she gonna do, right? That lets us finish off the knights. Paul gets a second to breathe. Maybe he's got like field medic or whatnot and he's able to heal himself. I don't know. Point is, you can see how like this could be used defensively to stall and to give your party the edge, right? So you're seeing that we're not really the DPS type character here, but that a lot of Blink Mage's tricks would allow the party to have an advantage if you're clever with your play and if you know what you're doing, right? Moving along, we do have more numbers go up or choose perks. And then level 15, we get some more choices. But in this case, we get to choose 2. So these are all viable. None of them are like amazing, I don't think. I think Rite of Returning was very good. Yeah, this is the one that was amazing. All right, I'll talk about Rite of Returning. These 2 are both good. They're both viable. But Rite of Returning is definitely one of the 2 you choose. Rite of Returning basically means this is your get out of jail free card, right? You no longer have to go into a dungeon that's balanced for you. You can now go in and get in over your head and then still teleport out of there. So you take 8 hours to magically scribe an anchor point into a clear area 20 feet in diameter. So let's say your room in the tavern that you stayed at last week, right? Once completed, you may use 2 actions to instantly transport all creatures, living or dead, within 10 feet of yourself back to this space, so long as you are on the same plane of existence. Once used, an anchor must be refreshed before it can be used again, which takes 4 hours. You may scribe multiple anchors across the world, but the time to do so triples for each new anchor. In this case, we only need the 1, right? We have our anchor at the tavern, a safe spot. We go and journey for a week to this dangerous and dark dungeon that will probably kill us, but I mean, there's also money there and cool magic items. So maybe we grab some cool magic items and then we teleport home when things get too rough. So let's say we're like 3/4 of the way through the dungeon, but we don't know that, right? The DM knows we're 3/4 of the way through the dungeon, but we know that like, oh boy, we are not doing so hot. Sorna's taken like 3 afflictions. What was the other guy's name? Paul. Paul's taken like 8, even for him with his high toughness from his tankier classes, right? Even that's starting to get a little bit high for 15 level Paul. I don't know if that's reasonable or not, but let's say the party is taxed. They have a lot of afflictions. We are clearly approaching a death spiral. We do need to take a week of downtime to heal up a bit. But we've still gone through a good chunk of this dungeon. We know that there's a dragon ahead. We don't want to fight the dragon. We know that like we've already looted like 2 magic items of good value for our level and like a handful of other little treasures and smaller like tricky type magic items, right? We've gotten more than enough. No need to get greedy. We're just going to wipe if we keep going forward. I'm going to Rite of Returning. The entire party is now back at the tavern, and we can start resting up immediately. We didn't have to risk the week travel back home. We didn't have to risk backtracking through the dungeon. We just, boom, we're out of there. Like, yes, you're level 15, so this does come very late in the campaign, but like, this is so good for dungeon delving. So good for dungeon delving. It makes me so happy that this is baked into like one of the core classes of this system, because this just, this makes me so happy. Like as a DM, as one who enjoys a good dungeon and who does allow for players to get in over their head, this is basically my high level designer get out of jail free card, right? It means that I can put whatever the fuck I think is thematically appropriate for that dungeon in that dungeon. And the party still has a way to get out of it, right? Because there's nothing saying you can't do this in combat either. It just, the party needs to be within 10 feet of you. So let's say that this outdoor field with cliff sides is in a dungeon, okay? It's illusory, right? It's in a wizard tower. It doesn't need to make sense. Don't worry about it. But let's say this event is looking not so hot. Even though we took Fancy Lady out of the fight and we burning hands to the knights and whatnot, like this is still too much for us. Our level 15 party is getting swept by this lady. Maybe she's some kind of powerful wizard. Maybe she's like a level 20 wizard, right? And all these knights are trained and stalwart and powerful, and they've got abilities that let them, I don't know, like maybe they put Paul in a flank box for a reason, right? Paul is really in trouble here. This is not going well, and we're a good chunk of the way through the dungeon, and we're probably gonna wipe if I don't do something. We can say, all right. Actually, let me double check something. Does it require both your actions? I think that's what it is. We use 2 actions. Okay. So it would take a turn to set up, but let's say we moved here, and then we, next turn, we'd have Andrea within 10 feet, we'd have Paul within 10 feet, there we go, we'd have Sorna within 10 feet, whoop, I didn't even double check on it, there we go. So then we could then teleport everyone home, right? And ideally, Paul survived that one turn while we reposition. And while we're repositioning, we could also have stabbed the fancy lady, right? I mean, for half damage, because she's been taken out of the fight. So we probably don't. We probably come down here and stab the knight instead. Actually, no, it'd be for half damage either way, so... Or is it? No, half damage against us, isn't it? Isn't that how it works? Let me double check that. I might be saying the wrong thing. Let's see. You take half damage from all sources, but are only able to do... Okay, it's both. It's both. You take half, but you deal half, right? So it doesn't really matter. So, okay. So fighting the fancy lady, or the fancy lady fighting us, that would be an interesting interaction. Because if she's taken out of it, then she deals half damage, which is then halved because we're also out of the dimension. So it would be, we'd be taking 1/4 damage from each other. Got it. That's how that would work. So we probably would want to move down here and then action to stab the knight, right? Ideally, all of our friends survive. If not, it did say we could bring corpses back. So let's say Paul is dead, right? The next turn comes up. Even though we didn't teleport out of there fast enough and Paul is dead, we can still then teleport ourselves back to town. And now, if there's a cleric in town, the cleric can go right to work on resurrecting Paul. No need for the the week-long trek back, right? The cleric can get right to work. I don't know how the resurrection mechanics are going to end up working in this game, but to me, that's significant, right? Hopefully you can see how, like, I don't know, I think, where is it? Here we go. Riot of Returning isn't powerful, right? It's not gonna like do anything to unbalance any encounters, but what it can do is vastly change the direction of a campaign, because otherwise having that time, let's think of it a different way. Let's say the enemy's army is marching on the starting town, right? And the party learns of this. And the enemy's army is 1 week away, but the party has been exploring the overworld and they're 3 weeks away, let's say. They now have a choice. They can either start going there and then arrive 2 weeks late and help clean up what remains of the town. Maybe free its people if they're still alive. Maybe these people were just taken prisoner, right? Maybe that is an actual viable option and they're not just going to kill everyone. Or they can just teleport back, and then they can help that town prepare for that week leading up to the attack. Or maybe they're just like, wait a moment, we're not strong enough right now, but we have a week to get stronger. Let's go run a dungeon. There's a local dungeon right near where we are at our 3 weeks place ahead. Let's go run that dungeon. So they go and run that dungeon. Maybe the player even sets up another little anchor point near that dungeon, so when they're done defending their town, they can teleport back to that dungeon, right? But anyways, they raid that dungeon, they now have a bunch of cool magical equipment, they're feeling a lot more confident and prepared that they can stand up to this enemy army. So when they teleport back, they handle that army, and they're just like, okay, cool. Now let's just go right back to that dungeon we were in the middle of. So there's also that kind of application as well. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know. I really like this. To me, it is the perfect support. Like, not necessarily in combat support. Yes, there's also that too, right? But beyond just like the whole in combat get out of jail free card potentially, there's also like utility in terms of storytelling and world building and exploration, and I really like that because I understand that people like the combat pillar, people like the roleplay pillar of D&D and tabletop gaming in general, right? But I also think that the exploration pillar is an underutilized pillar and is sorely missed and is very good. And this allows you to flex that exploration pillar so much more freely than you would in a campaign where a character does not have this kind of ability. That's not me saying that you should like always give your player characters a teleportation item, but it certainly is worth considering. And for some kind of campaigns, it would work very well. For the exact same examples that I think that this would work very well. Anyways, I'll stop gushing about how much I like this feature as a DM and as a player, and I'll just move on now. So, once again, numbers go up, or perk, or maybe you can now do your secondary class things a little bit cheaper, right? Which moves us to level 18. And let me double check these. Yeah, okay, so beyond here, numbers just go up, but significantly. But anyways, so this is our last major choice. Rending discontinuation is tricky and wordy, but it is your first consistent means of damaging people, which feels a little bit sad that it comes at level 18, but again, so far this seems like a class more based around utility and cleverness and not necessarily damaging, so I mean, that's probably fine, right? But basically what you can do is they save against being shunted into the raw source of magic for the setting. So if this was a D&D setting, that'd be the weave, right? In this particular case, raw ether is the terminology that this system uses. Whatever the source of magic is for your world, be it like a plane of power or whatnot, you just shunted the enemy in there, and they are struggling, man. So they take a metric ton of force damage, and then they also take magic damage for every turn they stay there. They get to repeat their save at the end of their turn to escape, but they take no other actions. So this is their entire turn. Their entire turn is spent escaping. So even if they do escape, you still took them out of combat for a turn. So there's a lot of very good utility in just that, right? Even if you don't end up dealing a bunch of damage, you still took them out of the game for one or more turns. So this is already a very powerful ability, which is probably why it's at level 18. Anyways, however, like, they do gain some resistance to this. So if you use this on the enemy lich, right, and the enemy lich escapes, and you end up finding the enemy lich again within the next 24 hours, and you try and use this on the lich again, well, now suddenly they're rolling 2d12 plus willpower to resist, so they're probably not going to be affected by it again, right? So there's a bit of a downside. You can't repeat it on the same creature, but different creatures. So you could use this on the Lich, and you could use this on the Lich's apprentice, and you could use this on the Lich's prized undead white commander. I don't know. White, W-I-G-H-T, not white as in the color. Anyways, my point is you could use this on different enemies in that encounter or in that lair, but not on the same Lich twice in the same day, is basically what this reads as. But anyways, basically they save against being taken out of the fight and taking a bunch of damage. That's the short of it. It's very powerful. I like it. It does go up in cost depending on the size of the creature. So a Lich is probably going to be medium-sized, right? So 15 mana is definitely doable. By a level 18 character, you're going to have 15 mana by now, right? But doing it against a giant, who's probably going to be in the large or giant category, maybe even upwards of that, suddenly that's a lot more pricey. Suddenly that's probably not as doable unless maybe you channeled right before doing it. That could be a thing. But regardless, it becomes a lot less doable unless you've been really heavily investing in your fortitude as you've been going along, and you have some of these big numbers to just use willy-nilly, right? So, it's technically doable no matter what, but it's probably best served using it against like your medium-sized humanoids, small-sized humanoids, that kind of thing. So it is a little bit situational, but more often than not, I feel like it's doable and is powerful, and it's worth considering. The opportunity cost, what you would give up if you took it, though, is pull others, and I like this one a lot because the utility of it. I like utility. Anyways, any number of people within 200 feet, all of them, right? you can try and teleport them within 10 feet of you into an unoccupied space. They have to make a will save. If they succeed, they resist. If not, they get teleported. The cost does go up, 5 mana per targeted creature. So if you are trying to teleport, like, I don't know, 20 people, suddenly that's 100 mana, right? I did the math right? Yeah, suddenly that's 100 mana, and that's not gonna happen. So, like, it does have its limits. It's not, like, unlimited number of people, but, like, let's say there's 5 people, right? Let's say you're about to teleport the party out of the dungeon via right of returning. The next turn, in this particular case, you target your entire party. They willingly fail their check, and now they are next to you, so the next turn you can teleport them all out of the dungeon. Let's say there was also a key enemy that had been trying to escape that was still 200 feet out, right? That was about to go and warn people, like a scout or something like that. You then teleport him back towards where you are, and of course the party just got teleported there. So now the party has a turn to get rid of that loose end, and then you can teleport them out of the dungeon, right? Or even if that wasn't something you were doing, let's say it's just like, you know what, I don't need to bring the party closer to me. The party's already close enough. But I do see the escaping general over there about to go and warn the Mad King if we don't capture him. So I teleport him next to me, and now Paul the fighter can disembowel him. It's just that simple, right? That's an application of pull others and how it can be very powerful. Not necessarily like damage-wise, but from a role-play and storytelling perspective, and from a get your party into a good position, which we've seen that like there's all sorts of fun options for that in this class already. This is just another good option to keep your party in a favorable position, both narratively and mechanically, right? And then numbers go up, and that's that. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how our character here, Blackheart Betty, would play throughout the entire campaign. She's definitely more of a support character. Via her assassin stuff, she can help Paul deal some extra little poison damage. Depending on our choice for avatar, she could do any number of little things. I think we did decide on Infernal. Yeah, so here's an example of how Infernal would work, right? After you dealt damage to a creature with an attack or spell, you may deal half as much infernal damage to it as well. So the key thing here is we want to use this on whatever our biggest source of damage is that day per rest, right? So in our case, if you recall, we did take Surprise Strike, which would maximize our damage to a d6. So let's say we do that, right? So now that's 6 damage, and then half of that is 3. Suddenly we are now, on the turn we're doing our Surprise Strike on Fancy Lady, which there's nothing saying we couldn't have done it from ranged either. Anyways, when we're doing our Surprise Strike on Fancy Lady here, we then dealt a cumulative 9 damage. That was split between 2 damage types, but that's still 9 damage. That's not insignificant. It did require us to mark off 5 stamina, but by the time we've gotten to level 4, which would be the earliest that we could do this, for 5 stamina anyway, otherwise it costs 10, which is a lot less doable at lower levels. But anyways, let's assume by level 4 we did take Surprise Strike. That then just let us exchange 5 stamina for 9 damage to a key target. So that's an area where we can kind of like use all 3 of our classes in synergy, right? The positioning of Blink Mage allowed us to do our crazy stuff with our assassin to trigger, to be stealthy enough to use Surprise Strike, which then allowed us to deal additional damage with Avatar, right? So that's like a potential fun little combo. And I'm sure that you could find all sorts of other combos between other classes. How many of them are intended and how many aren't? How many of them will get nerfed or taken out of the game? Who can say, right? But for right now, that's kind of that's this example character. Hopefully now you have like a basic understanding of how this system works and how leveling up works. When you level up, of course, your numbers go up. Your class also makes these numbers go up, your stat numbers. You could take more perks, which also are like little mini feats, right? And that also can make stuff go up or give you more options in combat, right? As you've been leveling up, toughness doesn't really get affected too much, I don't think. There are a few things that are tied to like half level on toughness, but for the most part, your toughness is kind of just effed. So you probably do want to take a perk on this character that modifies your toughness. That's probably what I would try and do if one of those was available. Anyways, I think that's it. So the like button exists. There are also other fun, happy buttons. There's me remembering to shill there towards the end. I plan to make more content like this, and if you want to, if you believe in me, if you believe that the kind of stuff I make has value, or if you're just looking for some amusement, some inspiration, that's what I am, a salesman of, baby. So feel free to shill me to the relevant communities of yours, because I can't be everywhere online. I can't integrate myself into every Reddit community, but you can certainly share my stuff there and farm free karma for yourself, right? Or whatever relevant community and service you happen to use. Because that's, in these early days, that's the only way I'm going to grow, right? It's word of mouth. Like, let's be honest here. The algorithms and whatnot is not going to promote someone like me making niche content. But I believe an audience exists. It is just a matter of time of people sharing my stuff and getting me out to that audience. So that ball is in your court now. I'll keep plugging away and making videos. You handle you handle the shilling. How about that? But yeah, push happy buttons. I hope this helped. I hope that you're now more in the mood to engage with this system. I think it's looking like it's going to be a pretty fun system. Within the next couple weeks, I believe, it's supposed to be in a playable state. So already it's pretty dang close to the point where I may take a stab at like patching up the things that I'm looking for and making it playable myself. So if that's something you're interested in, that'll probably be a live stream that'll happen within a day or so of this video going up. So keep an eye out for that if you're into live streams. Other than that, I also play video games sometimes. I want to play some Fire Emblem. I'm probably going to play some Pokemon. I don't just analyze game systems and stories and dungeons and whatnot. That's part of what I do, but also I'm human, right? This is a bit of a personal channel. So you're here for the content, right? But hopefully you're also here to see me fumble through this outro. I'll get better at it though. I'm improving every single time. I'm improving just a little bit. Anyways, I'm gonna get to editing this. So see you on the other side. Or I guess I already have. Bye!